Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The resignations didn't land on the mahogany desk with a bang. They landed with a whisper, sliding across the polished surface like a guillotine blade slicing through silk. "I'm done, Damon." Julian's voice was terrifyingly steady, lacking the usual tremor of anxiety that accompanied the quarterly reports or the shareholders' meetings. He didn't look like the terrified assistant he had been playing for 4 years, nor the doting lover he had been for 8. He looked like a stranger. Damon Thorne, the CEO of Thorne Heavy Industries and the man who held the city's economy by the throat, didn't even look up from his tablet. The city lights of Neoviridia sprawled behind him through the floor-to-ceiling glass, casting long, jagged shadows across the office. "Put the files for the Krav merger on the server before you leave, Julian. And stop with the dramatics. Order dinner. I'll be late tonight." "I'm not ordering dinner," Julian said, his hand hovering over the 2 envelopes, one white, one black. "And I'm not uploading the files. Because I don't work for you anymore. And I'm not waiting up for you. Because we aren't together anymore." That finally made Damon pause. The stylus in his hand stopped moving. The silence that filled the penthouse office was sudden and absolute, sucking the air out of the room. Slowly, the predator turned his gaze toward the man who had been his shadow for nearly a decade. "Repeat that," Damon commanded, his voice low, a rumble of thunder before the strike. "I quit the job," Julian said, tapping the white envelope. Then he tapped the black one. "And I quit us." The elevator ride down from the 99th floor felt like a descent into hell, or perhaps an ascent into purgatory. Julian leaned his forehead against the cold metal doors, his breath fogging the reflective surface. He saw his own reflection staring back, tired gray eyes, pale skin, the sharp cheekbones that Damon used to trace with his thumb before he stopped touching him altogether. 8 years. It was a lifetime. They had met when Damon was the black sheep of the Thorne family, disowned and clawing his way up from the gutter with nothing but rage and a brilliant, terrifying mind. Julian had been a scholarship student, an artist with ink-stained fingers and a heart too big for his own good. They had starved together in a studio apartment that smelled of damp plaster and cheap noodles. They had shared a single mattress, tangling their limbs together for warmth, whispering promises against each other's skin. "When I own this city," Damon had sworn, his lips brushing Julian's pulse, "I'll give you the world. You'll never have to lift a finger again." It was a lie. Not a malicious one, perhaps, but a lie nonetheless. As Damon's empire rose, erected on steel and ruthless acquisitions, Julian had stepped in to support him. First, it was just organizing schedules. Then, it was managing the household. For years ago, when Damon's paranoia about corporate espionage reached its peak, he had demanded Julian come work for him officially. "I can't trust anyone else," Damon had said, his eyes wild with stress. "I only trust you, Jules. Be my right hand." So Julian became the executive assistant. The gatekeeper. The fixer. The lines blurred. The boss didn't stop at the office door. The commands followed them home. The tenderness of the lover was replaced by the expectation of the employer. Dates were replaced by business dinners where Julian sat silently, looking pretty and pouring wine. Intimacy became a scheduled appointment, efficient and devoid of the slow, lingering heat they used to share. Julian had become a finely tuned instrument of Damon's will, losing pieces of himself with every promotion, every raise, every successful merger. But the breaking point hadn't been the overtime or the coldness. It had been 3 days ago. Julian had collapsed in the archives room. A burst appendix. He had called Damon 3 times from the ambulance, terrified, in agony. Damon hadn't answered. When Julian woke up after surgery, groggy and alone in a sterile VIP room, he checked his phone. One text from Damon. In a meeting with the Japanese investors. "Don't disturb me unless the building is on fire. Handle it. Handle it." Julian had stared at the screen until the battery died. He lay in that hospital bed for 2 days. Damon never came. He didn't even know Julian was in the hospital until Julian returned to the penthouse, still moving gingerly, to find Damon annoyed that his dry cleaning hadn't been picked up. That was the moment the love died. It didn't explode. It just withered, like a plant left in the dark for too long. The elevator dinged. The lobby was empty. Julian walked out into the rain. No umbrella, no car waiting. For the first time in 8 years, he had nowhere to go. And for the first time in 8 years, he could breathe. 2 weeks later, the chaos at Thorne Industries was not immediate, but it was inevitable. It started with small things. Files misplaced. Schedules overlapping. Coffee that tasted like sludge. Then, the cracks widened. Damon Thorne sat in his office, the air conditioner humming a low, irritating frequency he had never noticed before because Julian used to ensure it was serviced weekly. His desk was a war zone of paperwork. "Where is the Krav contract?" Damon barked, not looking up. I'm not sure, sir," stammered the new assistant, a young man named Eric with terrified eyes and shaking hands. "Mr. Vane's filing system is complex. It's color-coded by priority but also cross-referenced by potential risk factors, and I can't find the key." "Get out," Damon snarled. As the door clicked shut, Damon threw his pen across the room. It shattered against the wall, leaving a black ink stain on the pristine white paint. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. The headache had been constant for 14 days. He had expected Julian to come back. Julian always came back. He was soft. He was dependent. He had no family, few friends because Damon had monopolized all his time. Where would he go? "He's throwing a tantrum," Damon had told himself the first night. "He's trying to punish me for missing the hospital thing." But the penthouse was silent. The closet was half empty. The smell of Julian, vanilla, and old paper was fading from the sheets. Damon pulled out his phone. He opened the tracking app he had installed on Julian's phone years ago. For safety, he had insisted. User not found. Julian had ditched the phone. He had ditched the car. He had ditched the credit cards. Damon felt a cold spike of unease in his gut. It wasn't fear. Damon Thorne did not feel fear, but it was a loss of control. And Damon hated losing control. "Sir." Damon looked up. His head of security, Marcus, stood in the doorway. "Did you find him?" "It wasn't easy," Marcus said, stepping in. "He didn't leave a digital trail. He went cash only. Old school." "Where?" "He's renting a small studio above a bakery in the Arts District." "It's run down, sir." Damon stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. The predator was back on the scent. "Get the car." "Sir, we have the board meeting in 20 minutes. "Cancel it." "But," I said cancel it. Damon roared, slamming his fist on the desk. "If I don't get him back, there won't be a company to manage because nobody else knows how to run this godforsaken ship." It was an admission he hadn't meant to make, but the truth of it hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. The Arts District was a clutter of colorful graffiti, wet pavement, and the smell of roasting coffee. It was vibrant, messy, and everything Damon despised. He climbed the narrow, creaking stairs to apartment 3B. He didn't knock. He had a master key set that could open anything. Legalities were for lesser men. He pushed the door open. The room was small, bathed in the golden light of the afternoon sun filtering through sheer curtains. Canvases were propped against every wall. Some were blank, others splashed with violent, expressive colors. In the center of the room, wearing an oversized paint-stained sweater and holding a mug of tea, stood Julian. He looked different. His hair was messy, not gelled back. There was color in his cheeks. He looked younger. He didn't jump when Damon entered. He just took a sip of tea and sighed, as if he had been expecting a tedious delivery. "You took longer than I thought," Julian said. "Marcus must be slipping." "Pack your things," Damon said, his voice filling the small space. He felt overdressed in his three-piece Italian suit, a dark stain on the bright room. "The game is over, Julian. You've made your point." "It's not a game, Damon." Julian turned back to the canvas he was working on, a chaotic swirl of grays and blacks swallowing a single speck of gold. "Enough." Damon stepped forward, grabbing Julian's arm. "Do you have any idea what's happening at the company? The Krav merger is stalled. The shareholders are panicking. I can't find the encryption keys for the shadow accounts." Julian pulled his arm away. The motion was sharp, violent. He looked at Damon with eyes that were no longer soft gray, but hard like slate. "That sounds like an employer's problem," Julian said coldly. "And as I recall, I resigned." "And the relationship?" Damon stepped into his personal space, using his height to intimidate, a tactic that had always worked before. "You resigned from me, too?" After everything I gave you? I pulled you out of poverty. I gave you a life most people dream of. You gave me a gilded cage, Julian snapped, his voice rising. You turned me into a secretary who warms your bed. When was the last time you asked me how my day was, Damon? When was the last time we touched without you checking your watch? I am building a legacy. For us. No. For you. Julian corrected. I was just fuel for the engine. And I ran out of gas. Damon stared at him, genuinely baffled. In his world, value was transactional. He provided safety and wealth. Julian provided service and loyalty. That was the deal. Why was Julian changing the terms now? Name your price, Damon said, his voice dropping to a negotiator's tone. Double the salary. A separate apartment if you want space. I'll hire a second assistant to handle the grunt work. You just oversee. Julian laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. You still don't get it. I don't want your money. I want to be seen. And you haven't seen me in years. Julian walked to the door and held it open. Get out, Damon. Damon stood frozen. He had never been rejected. Not like this. If you walk out that door, Damon threatened, his pride flaring up to cover the sudden, aching void in his chest. I will burn this building down. I will buy this block and evict everyone. I will make sure you never sell a single painting in this city. Julian's expression didn't change. He looked at Damon with something worse than anger. Pity. Do what you have to do, Julian whispered. But you can't buy what I'm not selling anymore. Damon stormed out. But as he sat in the back of his limousine, watching the rain streak the windows, the titan of industry realized his hands were shaking. The crash came 3 days later. It wasn't financial. It was the Croft family. The merger Damon had been pushing wasn't just business. It was a peace treaty between two rival syndicates masking as corporations. Julian had been the one smoothing the ruffled feathers of the Croft patriarch, mediating the insults, translating the cultural nuances. Without Julian, Damon had offended Victor Croft during a video conference. A single mistranslated phrase. A moment of arrogance. Now, there was a hit out on Damon Thorne. Damon was in his penthouse when the security systems went dark. The high-tech fortress Julian had helped design turned against him. The lights cut out. Damon reached for the gun in his desk drawer, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was alone. His security team was locked out in the lobby. The glass doors to the balcony shattered. 3 men in tactical gear stepped through the wind and rain. Damon fired twice, missing. He was a brawler, not a soldier. A boot connected with his wrist, sending the gun skittering across the floor. He was kicked in the chest, hard, and thrown back against his desk. The leader of the hit squad aimed a silenced pistol at Damon's forehead. Mr. Croft sends his regards, the man said in a thick accent. Damon gritted his teeth, staring death in the face. He didn't think of his money. He didn't think of his legacy. He thought of the smell of vanilla and old paper. He thought of Julian. I should have stayed at the hospital, he thought. I should have gone. Suddenly, the lights flickered back on, blindingly bright. The elevator doors pinged open. Stop. The voice cracked like a whip. The assassins turned. Julian stood in the elevator entrance. He wasn't armed with a gun. He was holding a tablet. Julian, run. Damon screamed, blood trickling from his lip. Julian didn't run. He walked forward, his face pale, but his eyes blazing with a ferocity Damon had never seen. He held the tablet up. I just transferred the encryption keys for the Croft family's offshore accounts to a dead man's switch, Julian announced, his voice steady. If Damon dies, or if I die, the IRS, the FBI, and Interpol get the location of $3 billion in laundered assets. The lead assassin hesitated. You're bluffing. Am I? Julian tapped the screen. Check your comms. I just sent a sample to your boss. A moment of tense silence stretched, the rain pounding against the broken glass. The assassin raised a hand to his earpiece. He listened, his face paling. He lowered the gun. You are playing a dangerous game, little secretary, the assassin spat. I'm not a secretary, Julian said, his chin lifted high. I'm the one who knows where the bodies are buried. Now, get out before I release the second batch. The men retreated. They vanished into the storm as quickly as they had come. As soon as they were gone, Julian's legs gave out. He slumped to the floor, the tablet clattering from his hands. Julian. Damon scrambled across the floor, ignoring his bruised ribs. He reached Julian, pulling him into his lap. Julian was shaking violently, gasping for air. "You idiot," Damon rasped, brushing the hair from Julian's forehead. "You came back. You could have died." "I didn't come back for the job," Julian stammered, his teeth chattering. "I couldn't let you die. You're terrible at passwords. You would have lost everything." Damon looked at the man in his arms. He saw the terror, the bravery, and the lingering love that 8 years of neglect hadn't managed to fully kill. And for the first time in his life, Damon Thorne wept. He buried his face in Julian's neck, sobbing, his arrogant facade shattering completely. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I made you invisible." Julian didn't hug him back immediately. He let Damon cry. He let the powerful CEO unravel on the floor of his broken castle. Slowly, tentatively, Julian's hand came up and rested on the back of Damon's head. "I'm not coming back to work, Damon," Julian whispered. Damon pulled back, his eyes red and swollen. "I know. I don't care. I don't care about the company. I'll burn it. Just don't leave me alone in the dark again." "I'm not coming back to the relationship, either," Julian said softly. Damon froze. The fear returned, colder than the assassin's gun. "Not the way it was," Julian clarified. He pushed himself up, forcing Damon to sit back. The power dynamic had shifted. Julian was no longer looking up. He was looking level. "I am not your subordinate. I am not your housewife. If we do this, if we try, we start over. Date 1. You woo me. You earn me. And I keep my apartment." Damon looked at Julian, really looked at him. He saw the strength he had taken for granted. He saw the partner he had almost destroyed. "Date 1, Damon agreed, his voice hoarse. "I can do that." "Good." Julian stood up, dusting off his pants. He looked down at Damon, who remained on the floor, looking up like a devotee at a shrine. "Get up, Damon. You have a window to fix." Damon stood, wincing in pain, but a small, genuine smile touched his lips. It wasn't the smirk of a victor. It was the smile of a man who had been given a second chance he didn't deserve. "Dinner?" Damon asked tentatively. "I know a place. Bad noodles. Cheap wine." Julian paused. A ghost of a smile appeared on his face. "The place on 4th Street. That's the one. It's closed, Damon. It's been closed for 2 years." Damon's face fell. "Oh, but," Julian said, walking toward the elevator, "there's a taco truck near my studio that's pretty good." Damon Thorne, billionaire, master of industry, nodded eagerly. Tacos. Tacos sound perfect." He followed Julian into the elevator. He didn't check his watch. He didn't check his phone. He just watched Julian, terrifyingly aware that for the first time in 4 years, he was no longer the boss. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing Julian finally take control and bring a billionaire to his knees, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who prioritized a meeting over your surgery, even if he groveled like Damon? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then.